Gentlemen, and welcome back to Inside Movies Galore. I'm your host for this evening, and tonight's entertainment for tonight discussion is about George A. Romero's second feature into the Living Dead trilogy, which was filmed in 1978. And so in the room we have Brandon.
Hello.
And also we have Dustin.
He's
Whenever
still watching.
he gets a chance. Oh, oh. Uh, and we also have
Well, we
another
may have Jacob.
a friend of ours by the name of Jacob. Hello, Jacob.
Hear anything. Okay.
I just said your name, so say hello. Oh, oh,
He fell off.
for a moment, but that's okay, ladies and gentlemen. He's not dead, like the film. So, why don't we start with Brandon? What was your first take on this particular film?
This is a weird one because I saw the remake first. And to me, I always think of the remake whenever I think of this film. So,
So do I. I mean, it's like almost like a different contrast when you go back and see this film. But go ahead. Tell us.
I I saw the film itself not well, I mean a few years ago. Probably more than a few years ago, actually, if I think about it. But I remember watching it and being pretty impressed by it overall. Again, I was familiar with the remake. And then when I watched this one, which was a much longer version, I had a much harder time remembering it because I kept confusing it and saying, wait, no, this doesn't make sense. When did they do this? And I'm thinking about, stuff from the remake every time. I think that, but still, it is a cornerstone in a lot of the zombie history because it builds off of Romero's original film, uh, unlike anything else others had seen before. So it was kind of cool to get to see that again, almost as if it was the first time.
And my introduction into this was not until I had actually picked up my particular copy of this film, which was the Ultimate Edition copy that Anchor Bay came out with, and that had three different versions on it. So when I went and saw this film, I saw that I didn't see this in the theater because I wasn't that old when it first came out, and I have to say, this film was all over the place for me. And it's not my entire favorite of the franchise. My all-time favorite of the trilogy is always going to be the Living Dead. That is always going to be the trademark of this trilogy for me. But seeing this again, I saw different things that I didn't see before, and I'm glad that I resaw it. So other than that, what um, let's see if we can't get some of our other guests on momentarily. Let's see. Uh,
Well, we can talk a little bit, I guess, about things. Like
well,
there was a lot of world building in this one. In my opinion, I feel like this was really him starting to create a Walking Dead universe. Not Walking Dead, but you know what I mean.
it was. But before we get into that, why don't I do a synopsis of that is on IMDb about the film? Shall I?
Okay.
Let's do follow. Okay, so IMDb says following an ever-growing epidemic of zombies that have risen from the dead, two Philadelphia SWAT team members. See, I thought they were police, so knowing that they're SWAT team is a totally different thing. A traffic reporter and his television executive girlfriend seek refuge in a secluded shopping mall. So, one thing I'm gonna say is that I found out that much of the film was filmed in um, Philadelphia. Oh no, Pennsylvania, and Pittsburgh and Monroeville, specifically at Monroeville Mall. So, at least this particular film. So, what do you think about that? That it was in um, those areas.
Well, I mean, it was cool to have different areas to film, and it's amazing what they can do with so little sometimes. Sometimes they can actually stretch things in ways that many of us who are not in film can not, what do they call it? Not imagine. I would say still they did a lot with what they had, and Romero is just an excellent film creator in general. I mean, I I keep thinking. I mean, the mall setting just in of itself was is now thought of as just a regular classic, but this was the first time they did that and they used that. And
Yeah,
there's a game. There's a game that I really enjoyed way back on the Xbox 360 called Dead Rising, which was basically this movie, except you're the guy reporter in the mall killing all the zombies, which it's a fun setting. I mean, it really is, and kind of a statement on consumerism at the same time.
yeah. I mean, there was definitely a lot of chaos going on in a film, and a lot of new things added. Whereas in the original Night of the Living Dead, the movie, you had a brother and a sister. That ended up going to just a rural home setting, and you saw the zombies attack one home, and then you heard what was going on, in the outside world. Where in here, yeah, you still hear what's going on in the outside world through a television screen, but it goes from a newscast room to a mall setting with people in the end zone of all of this supposed zombie traffic, the continuing story of the rise of the dead. Now, what do we think of the? Did we want to get into more character stuff, or did we want to wait and see what happens?
Well,
And
we could hang around the plot line for a little bit longer, I guess, while we're waiting to see others join us. Uh, Especially with the settings. I mean, it is kind of cool to talk about the world building that he's done, and maybe that's something we can do as we wait. I mean, really and truly, it's amazing when you look at the world because you've got Night of the Living Dead, you've got Dawn of the Dead, and you've got Day of the Dead,
Yeah.
and but it's
What do you
not
think?
a
What do you
quick
think?
process.
What do you think of the zombie as a creature? First of all, do you think it is a terrifying thing?
There's so many different incarnations of them. I mean, on their own, they're more to be pitied. Watching them, I mean, there's a scene in the movie where, I mean, all the other zombies are hitting on the glass. Just the other one is just down on the floor, just staring, just like blankly to the inside of the store. It's I think they're both to be pitied and to be feared.
I think so
Uh,
too, because what could have been terrifying at one point in time, looking back at some of these scenes, is like how terrifying do you think just going up against a thing of glass or oh he's in um
All right.
we were just talking about the zombies themselves.
Okay.
So,
might as well go into first impressions for you.
but
Hmm.
we might as well go into first impressions for you. So, Jacob, welcome to the discussion. And
Hi.
what was your first reaction to this film? Was this a first time watch for you, or
More favorable than my first reaction to this streaming outlet. But anyway, it was definitely my first viewing. I have not seen this one before. I had seen Night of the Living Dead, but not this particular one. Honestly, I felt like the begin. It was kind of similar in a way to 13 Ghosts. The beginning was so chaotic, it almost put me off to the whole movie. And eventually, it got into a groove where I found it much more watchable, and it wasn't bad overall.
Actually, you know what's funny is that this cut extends that beginning part a lot more than the cut I've watched, at least the other one I watched.
I'm not
So
surprised.
it may be that a different cut might have been more suited towards you.
Right. Well,
But
it's
yeah,
my understanding that the American cut was intended to be a little more campy, and the international cut was intended to be a little more shock and horror sort of thing. So, either way, I don't know that chaos really served either purpose all that well, but
well, this
more
was
so the international version.
this was considered the extended cut, which it
Right.
139 minutes.
Uh-huh.
Now, Argento's copy was even less than the theatrical. I don't know why. Originally, I thought that Argento's was the longest, but this was actually the longest, and it ended up being shown at the Cannes Festival
Hmm.
in like 2003 or 2005. Trying to not misconfuse my years here, but it was the the British censorship had cut a few of the earlier scenes. Like there was a headshot scene that was not in the original theatrical cut. There were a few gore scenes that were cut from the film,
Hmm.
and so on and so forth. So,
Hmm.
oh, he okay.
huh.
Dustin is in. He's you're in the stream, Dustin. You can actually join us if you want. Um,
Hmm.
He's in the last few minutes of the film. But
Right.
as far as things go, I think we were discussing. But when you came in, we were discussing the zombie as a, or really, I should say the Romero zombie because there's so many different types.
Right.
Um, and we were discussing our impressions of the Romero zombie. I mean, what's your impression of the Romero zombie?
Well, I mean, it's kind of become sort of the stereotypical one in pop culture at this point, kind of the mindless, not too much motor control, that sort of thing. I've seen more interesting versions, and I've certainly seen scarier versions, but it was interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I was one of the things I was going to comment on was as far as the world, it's interesting how each one comes in. Because
Hmm.
Walking Dead, for instance, the world goes to heck real quick.
Yeah.
Like within a couple of days, they're overrun and society is dead.
Hmm.
Especially if you watch Fear Walking Dead by like episode 2 or 3, there's no society left. It's whereas in this one, you can actually see that society is fighting back, and you see that also in the first one. I mean, in the first film too, and even in Day of the Dead, where they're losing the war.
Well, let's go back to the very beginning scenes here. Very beginning scenes here. We've got in the in this newsroom, we have a professor that is talking about the zombie invasion and how to shoot them in the head. And on the other hand, you've got the talk show host, and then of course you've got the people in the background that are part of the crew that are totally against killing human beings.
Hmm.
So you like I think to me I was thinking, okay, those guys are kind of like acting like the end of the 60s era where they're all I love you, man. I love you. I want peace. I want world peace. That kind of a thinking process. When this professor is telling them, you got to shoot them in the head, and the guys in the background are like, no.
And don't forget to double tap.
Well, a line that they say later in the movie illustrates that fight pretty well. Where they're talking about, there's no more room in hell. And in a way, one could say that the fight against the zombies is Revelations, where it is the fight between heaven and hell at that point. I'm not sure that the humans would be the best representation of heaven, but
Yeah. What was the exact line? When there's no more room in hell, the dead will walk the earth. Was that what it was?
There was actually a campaign I was in a zombie role-playing game called All Flesh Must Be Eaten.
Oh, I remember that.
There is a campaign that has almost a religious bent to it, and you, as you go through, you realize that the zombies are basically the souls left on Earth, and those that become the zombies, their souls are taken up and out because they're at that the Day of Judgment. And it is an interesting concept that stuck with me for many years because this was back in probably 98, 99 that we did that. But still, that concept, this right now is in the thick of the war. People are still trying to figure out where the sides are and where the lines are to be. So it's a really cool setting up, I should say, of the world, because it goes from that newscast right to that raid, which is also used to set that up.
Well, what's interesting to me is the contrast between color and since we've already talked about Night of the Living Dead, Night of the Living Dead was done in black and white, and his zombies in black and white, I thought, were better than these zombies to me. For some reason, the original zombies in the first one were much more stoic, and yes, they did drag themselves around. They didn't do a lot of the stupid things like you saw in here. In this particular film, there was a lot of different scenes in here, and a lot of different scenes that I don't remember from my first viewing. So I'm glad that I did go back and see this, like I said, and like there are moments where you see the entire parking lot of the mall, and they're just walking across. Slowly or whatnot before the trucks started mowing them down. But what do we think about the beginning two characters, the newscaster and his girlfriend?
Well,
yeah,
they're there.
yeah.
Yeah, you're talking, I'm sure, the Steven, he was a traffic reporter, if I remember correctly, right?
Correct.
And then Francine was his girlfriend, who's like a production assistant or some such thing.
Correct.
Yeah. Honestly, at the beginning, they both annoyed the freaking hell out of me.
Why is that?
And was that?
Why is that?
Well, for one, neither of them was very competent, especially when you get to the other two characters. They paled in comparison.
Oh yeah.
But later on, I just certain factors came into play that made me more sympathetic to Francine. But for much of the film, she just didn't act nearly as much as I would have liked to see. It's my understanding that she actually fought to make the character more active and less passive, and that's great, because I would have despised the character otherwise, I think. But she was still too passive at critical moments, and I just, yeah, they were not my. Steven grew on me. He became a pretty fun character, I think, as it went on, but because he definitely grew in his ability to handle the situation. But yeah, at the beginning, he was too tunnel focused on what, we need to get here, we need to do this, but he was too tunnel focused on what he wanted to do and wasn't really assessing the situation properly, I think.
Well, I think if anyone had to deal with the zombie apocalypse on their hands and realize that they have to stay put for the time being until they can find find an option or an opening to escape.
Right. Which I think it was the other two that got the idea of using the mall, which is kind of, but yeah, I'll get to them after you guys do those first two.
Yeah, I mean, in the very beginning, I feel like Francine was on the side of the people who didn't want to kill anything. Like she would have been one of the tree huggers.
What?
People who care about not killing animals in any way, shape, or form.
I'm one of those people, and I'd have no problem killing zombies.
Yeah, they're clearly quite dangerous. So, you guys hear me?
There's a fine line.
I was kind of delayed, so sorry to be a bit late here. So
that's okay. Well, we can start with your first.
Oh, we're still on first impressions?
Well, we started to talk about characters,
well, mine is I had some extra time to think about it. So I mean, I'd heard of Dawn of the Dead, I guess, kind of here and there throughout my life. And when I got my first like modern like gaming console, my first game was Dead Rising, which is surviving in a mall full of zombies.
No, we talked about that one earlier, so that's kind of good that you brought that up.
And I remember, I think my first actual exposure to Dawn of the Dead was some news story where I think somebody on Romero's behalf was trying to like sue the Dead Rising people for it's like, hey, there are zombies in a mall, and they lost because it's just zombies in a mall. Like it was like a vague enough concept, I guess. But I remember being like, who the heck is this guy? Yeah, because I was a big Dead Rising fan, and it kind of made me mad. And then, several years after that, it's like, oh, Dawn of the Dead. I should watch this. Like, I found the DVD at a pawn shop, and it was pretty good. So this is a lot of people's like all-time favorite movie. For me, it's a little. I hope I don't make anybody too mad. But it's kind of like wow, it's a good movie, and yeah, I enjoy rewatching it. I don't quite get the devote your life to it kind of fandom that some people have.
I'm actually kind of in the same boat as you, Dustin, on this one because it kind of like jumped to a lot of places. But
there's a lot of variety to the story.
A little bit ago, we were discussing what we thought of the Romero zombies themselves before we delved into the characters. What do you think of these zombies as a creature?
I kind of like the classic Romero like slow moving zombie as kind of a threat that like overwhelms you with numbers. Like the fast zombies in, well, going back to video game references, like Left 4 Dead, like the zombies in Left 4 Dead like didn't feel right, and then there are the zombies or mutants, depending on who you talk to, in something like 28 Days Later, which I personally hated.
It's one of the only serious zombie films I like.
I was bored senseless by it. Like digression aside, so I think I really like the Romero zombies. It's sort of hard to. I'm trying to decide if I like the concept of zombies better from like Return of the Living Dead, which I'm actually wearing my Return of the Living Dead shirt, and I was talking a bit about Dan O'Bannon with somebody today, so that was kind of on my mind as we were prepping to watch Dawn. And it's sort of like the spirit of it, but like sped up, I guess, with Return of the Living Dead. But I don't know. There's something about like Romero's zombies that I just really enjoy, and like they get nastier in Land of the Dead. I still haven't seen Diary of the Dead or Survival of the Dead, which after I finish with. So for the show, like I watched Dawn of the Dead on the really fancy like DVD set, and as soon as I finish that mountain of content, I think my next movies will be those last two Romero zombie movies. So I guess we'll get to see kind of how they've evolved over the years, because didn't it seem like Romero's zombies kind of changed in each film? Like, didn't they speed up, or like they were able to learn?
I believe they kind of sped up, and I believe they changed over time because they had to evolve as we evolved, and in the concept of what we thought a zombie, a living dead, really was,
Yeah, I think Romero himself might have made that point in the commentary for Land of the Dead. So it's sort of coming back to me.
Yeah, to me,
no, this is a great movie, and even people that aren't horror specialists have been able to like get into it too. So
when you came in, we started talking about what we thought about the
individual humans.
The individual humans, the first two that we see in the very beginning, and that very beginning scene. What did you think about that very beginning newscasting scene?
I'm trying to remember the girl's name. I remember the other dude is called Flyboy. Um,
Yes,
Well, I
that was his
remember-
official name.
yeah. Well, I liked how the movie started with just showing society in crisis, and you see them, interact with people, and they're just like normal people. It's like, oh, okay, we got to get out of the city. There's this disaster, and there isn't anything terribly remarkable about them in those introductory scenes, or in my opinion, really throughout the rest of the movie. They just feel like two people you would meet on the street who are put into this situation, and they just deal with it like the best they can. Like, they're not like action heroes. They're just this couple that works at a TV station. Whereas moving on to, so I can't remember the other soldier's name. And I don't know, is Ken Foree's character called Ben?
Ken Foree is Peter, and the other one is Roger.
Roger. I just kept calling him Ken Foree. So I just keep saying Ken Foree.
I actually recognized him from somewhere else.
Was he in The Crazies?
I can't remember what I saw him in.
I thought, wasn't he in some other Romero project first, or was this his first one?
Actually, several of these people were involved with Knight Rider. Was he one of them?
I think Knight Rider came after this, didn't it?
Yeah, a little bit after.
Made largely with, I think they talked about using some of the gear for Dawn of the Dead, like when they were shooting Knight Rider.
Oh, yeah, Ken Foree was in Brutal Massacre, a comedy. That's one I did see.
Nice. But now, I mean, since we're talking character, like, I think my favorite character would be Ken Foree's Peter, because he's so dynamic and like knows what he's doing. Like, he's really like the hero of the movie, even though it's more of a kind of slow character drama almost.
I would have
a lot of these action dressings.
I would have to say my favorite is actually Roger. For some reason, his going out and mowing down those zombies with that crazy fury after he got attacked by that zombie woman. But we actually have an audience member who was listening to our conversation, who brought up a point. He said I think Dawn is easier to relate to and gets that type of fandom because everyone can easily imagine themselves getting cozy and holding out in a mall during a zombie outbreak.
Yeah. I can see it.
Night is too bare bones to really fantasize too much around. Being a bunker like in Day is a little out of reach for most of us.
It takes place it's like an everyday setting, but you also get almost a little bit of like wish fulfillment, like a fantasy. Because what if I could live at the mall?
Yeah.
And just get whatever I wanted.
I think there is some truth there.
I wonder if there's a generational thing about it, if you think about it. Because there was a generation of us, millennials and Gen Xers, that essentially that was in the mall's heyday. Everybody went to the mall. I mean, of course, these days, a lot of younger folks don't. I mean, some still go to the mall, but the mall is kind of dying. But really, it was this at that time, especially the time of Dawn of the Dead. It was a central figure in American culture.
Yeah, that's
and it remains such. I mean, it remains such all the way up until the early 2000s, when it started. People started just staying at home and ordering online.
Right. And I'd read that Romero, like, he was given a tour of the mall shortly after it opened, and they made the comment of, you could really use this as something like this would be a good place to be in an emergency or something like that. And it's like, yeah, it's kind of a fun starting point here.
You think so, huh?
Yeah. Okay, so I'm looking this up, and this is hilarious to me. This was actually Ken Foree's second movie, according to IMDb. He had a few TV credits, but his one previous film is called The Bingo Long Traveling All-Stars and Motor Kings, which co-starred Billy D. Williams, James Earl Jones, Richard Pryor, Otis Day. That sounds like an intriguing film there. I don't know. It's and yes, he was in Knight Riders as well as the David Hasselhoff series Knight Rider.
What's interesting is not only was Tom Savini in Knight Rider.
Yes, yeah,
Oh,
Tom Savini.
Well, Tom Savini was here too, yeah.
When I saw him, I was like, "Oh, I know that dude."
Well, to me, that whole entire bike scene was like, oh, Romero's tired of doing the zombies. He wants to do his Knight Riders film.
Well, it may have been, yeah.
Well, I think the biker raid shows that as how do I phrase this? Well, as fortified and great a place the mall was, they couldn't stay there forever. Like eventually something would go. Eventually they would have to leave the mall. Like they couldn't just stay there for the rest of their lives. And that was just kind of like an external force. And it's like, okay, that time is now.
That paradise cannot last forever.
Exactly. Right. That's a way better way to phrase that. Good job.
Well, it had already shown some serious cracks. I mean, we haven't really talked about. I think at this point, Roger had already met his fate, and you'd seen the other characters starting to show some problematic. Definitely, the lovebirds were having some troubles. So, yeah.
What do we think about the time that they had to spend in this mall? How much time do you think that they actually spent here foraging for stuff?
They had to be there at least a few weeks, right?
I'd say it was probably 2 or 3 months.
It looked like a long period of time, even though it seemed like they had gone in, but as the film went on, you saw that they started to grab some cheese, some sausages. Eventually, it looks like Francine got pregnant.
Well, she was at the beginning.
Yeah, she was.
And that's how you know almost exactly how far it was, because when they revealed that, he said, Steven revealed it to the others, which was so nice of him to do. He said like 3.5 or 4 months. And at the end, I would say maybe 8. So that's about 4 months, maybe. I mean, it's pretty clear that it was no longer than that, but no shorter, really. Yeah.
How do you think the 2 SWAT team members are taking their time together with the other 2? Do you think that they always get along?
They seemed to be handling it pretty well, although leading up to that failed raid where Roger was like lethally injured, he seemed to be kind of unraveling just a little bit. Like he was tense, like he was sort of fraying at the ends. You could tell something was probably going to happen sooner or later.
Yeah. I mean, it has said in the comments there, nothing good lasts forever. I mean, the female lead, she had been showing some cabin fever. I think she saw that from the beginning. She never wanted to be there at the start. She wanted to go straight to Canada, and I'll admit, I don't know why the character just annoyed me throughout the entirety of it. I just had a hard time getting to like her character.
The Peter and Roger definitely
really have a whole lot to do.
Yeah, They definitely took to it a lot more. I think wasn't it Roger was the one that really came up with the idea in the first place. I can't remember for sure.
Where
But
he's like,
definitely
hey, look, there are supplies down there. Let's check it
right,
out.
right. But it was like even from the beginning, like he was very competent and assured, but he was also you could tell even from the beginning, especially in retrospect, you could tell he was definitely a little more of a risk taker and a little more, willing to do something that might not be the safe way of going about it. And definitely he was the first one to crack under the strain, which is why, he ended up getting in the position he found himself in. But I will admit, until the character cracked, he was a pretty fun character. Once he went nuts, I started going, no, he needs to go.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree.
But I liked Peter from start to finish. He was a fun character. He was pretty competent. He kept his cool, which was obviously good in this situation. Yeah.
I thought it was weird when he cracked like that because he seemed like so much more of a serious character at the beginning, especially at those beginning scenes where they're raiding the
Apartment building.
the building and all that stuff.
Member says the SWAT guys likely had a little bit of survivalist mentality going on, where the civilian couple definitely had to attempt or adapt to the circumstances more, I think.
Right.
Yeah, and those opening scenes like are so intense where it really sets up like what's happening in the world like at large. Like we have the SWAT raid, and like some members of the SWAT team are just going insane. Like especially that one guy with his little monologue, just blow them all away. Yeah, what are we doing? Yeah, shoot him. It's like, jeez. You sure he should be on duty, guys?
They were probably short-staffed.
Good point.
Well, I mean, that was a graphic where he blew that one person's head totally clean off with the shotgun at the beginning.
Right. So, which was apparently an example of we have a prop that we need to use.
All right. So here's the question: if any of you were stuck in this mall, what would be the first thing that you would do?
The first thing,
probably secure it like they did.
Yeah.
I mean, looking for ways to secure it. That was the best way to go.
Yeah.
You had them walking around in the mall. I think what they did was the right thing, at least at first, getting it together like that.
Yeah, have a fortifiable place that the zombies can't get to, which they got pretty lucky. They started out with pretty much like the best setup there, because there was only like the one staircase. I mean, they did have to. Well, that eventually came apart, of course. But building like that fake wall, like that seemed to be like I don't know if that wasn't exactly the first thing they did, was it? Like it seems like they went out for like initial supplies first.
They did do a supply run first, I think. And they did a supply run before they decided to stay. Basically, they like, well, why not just stay here for a while, But
most of the stores had closed. Had already got the stuff closed there, so they were able to do.
Okay. So
there weren't a lot of entry points for the zombies. It seemed like it was a relatively easy thing to set up. Like just block off the right doors to the outside, and then shoot the few dozen or so zombies actually inside the mall.
And it certainly helped that they had a helicopter and that the mall had a wide, flat roof.
What I found interesting is did you notice that the zombies were afraid of the little homemade Molotovs that they had made? The
Right.
the little flare gun, the little flame gun,
You mean the acetylene torches?
yeah, whatever you want to call.
Yeah.
Zombies afraid of fire.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
So
a fairly common trope in a lot of movies where like the monster is like, fire, bad.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So
Is it bad that I thought of like Alien for that instead of Frankenstein?
well, it's interesting. I got into a really awkward discussion with someone about Frankenstein Stein not too long ago, where I thought that he was a zombie or whatnot, and they really think that he was not. I, he was a thing that was reanimated. He was.
So
I think
I sort of have this is sort of resolved in like a different like fantasy continuity. In like Magic, the card game, there's a place called Innistrad, which it's kind of like gothic horror themed land, and zombies made like Frankenstein, like stitched together from like separate corpses are like their own common enough thing. Like they're called scabs. It's like a whole like almost it's like a whole science there.
mm-hmm.
But they are considered zombies despite being kind of not the traditional sort of zombies. Like they're special zombies, but they're still considered zombies. So I would consider Frankenstein a zombie if I had to give like a hard yes or no.
Okay.
I guess you could say, like, in terms of the actual, like, the religions that actually gave rise to, all the zombie stuff in the first place. In that respect, I don't think you could count Frankenstein as one. But if you look at it as sort of like the scientific equivalent, you probably could. You know what I mean? Like,
what version of Frankenstein also? Because if you're going straight from the Mary Shelley book, one could say that he really restored, well, maybe not restored, but he created life. Whereas the Frankenstein that most of the films depict is more of a zombie-like creature, more of an undead type creature.
Solomon Grundy.
So you would go more with so by that also you would probably discount the idea that the one in Young Frankenstein would be a zombie. He would be more definite. Come back to life. Sorry, Young Frankenstein.
One thing probably worth noting is for a long time, Romero referred to his zombies as ghouls because technically, I mean, we've seen Serpent on the Rainbow, right? So technically, a zombie is a specific thing to that area, created in a specific way, whereas ghouls are, like humanoid creatures that eat corpses.
They're like spirits almost. Ghouls.
Ghouls are pretty fleshy.
Yeah.
But
there's a fun episode of Tales from the Crypt involving ghouls, and they actually call them ghouls, which is pretty rare.
And we also talked about a specific William Castle film that involved ghouls. So.
I want to say Castle Freak, but that's almost certainly wrong. I don't know. I'm tired. Like, school was long and difficult today.
Well, I think we've talked a lot about the
characters
and the characters. So why don't we go to production values?
Do we talk about Tom Savini as the leader of the biker gang?
Yeah, that was interesting.
Okay.
Yeah.
I just thought he was cool, and like whenever Tom Savini talks about this movie, he's always like just so excited. It's like, hey, there I am, yeah. It's like, oh, there's the machete in the head. That's everyone's favorite gag, yeah. And it's just like, your enthusiasm is so refreshing. I mean, you must have seen this movie over 1,000 times by now, and you're just like still here for it. Like, oh, so cool.
Well, it is a very important film. It's something to be excited for if you're involved in it, because, I mean, really, I mean, being involved in it is quite the thing.
Yeah, even people who are just like extras, can, people want their autographs. Like, the love for this movie is so intense.
There is a lot for this,
but not in like a weird way, in like a good way, like all positive.
Yeah, I mean that in a good way.
I mean, even if you take the movie as just a movie in and of itself, it's more what it created than anything else.
There are a lot of slow moments in this film. That I think that's part of my issue with the film. Although I kind of like how they do go and show bits and pieces of like the other parts of the mall, and to me, seeing this mall reminds me of going trick or treating in Northridge Mall before it closed down. Which, believe it or not, in the remake of the Dawn of the Dead, they used bits and pieces of the closed down Northridge Mall.
Nice. That was. I'm gonna go out on a limb here. That was honestly a fairly decent remake. Like, I didn't really know the history of it when I first heard of the remake. It's like I kept trying to. So, Dawn of the Dead on Blu-ray from Anchor Bay is really rare and really expensive. And every time I would look for Blu-rays, I would look for that, and almost without fail, I would get tricked by the spine on the remake one. So I really hated the remake for a long time, specifically because it was like, yes, score! What? Damn it! But on its own, like it's definitely a lot more of an action movie, but I have a pretty high tolerance for things, so I mean, it was all right. And it managed to be like its own thing. And hey, James Gunn wrote it, so
yeah, but Zack Snyder directed.
Oh well, Zack Snyder used to be pretty good. Let's be honest. 300 was cool. Watchmen was cool.
Well, 300 was cool, but it had no depth or substance whatsoever. And
but it was cool.
Watchmen, yeah, it was.
Back in those days, my brain was mush, so that wasn't important.
I always considered Zack Snyder all style, no substance.
Yeah.
And really and truly, even his best films are exactly that.
Right. Watchmen had some great parts, but as a film as a whole, it was
Hey, artistically, it was very pretty.
It did have one of the best trailers I've ever seen. But anyway.
I mean, I enjoyed Watchmen, but I'm probably one of the few who did. I still need to see that ultimate version that Dane had recommended.
It's pretty much. So, do you have that Tales from the Black Freighter like thing that's like a separate release? Because the ultimate cut is basically just that. The ultimate cut is the movie with like the deleted scenes and all of the segments from the Black Freighter inserted in when they happen in the comic. It's actually, if you haven't read the comic, it's honestly incredibly confusing. Because I showed it to somebody, and he was just like, "What the fuck was that pointless ass cartoon?" It's like it's going somewhere. You just have to. Well, I'll explain it in a minute. So it was
that might be a good movie for us to hit one of these days. But yeah,
I still got it. It's around here.
Yeah. All right.
Very big box on the shelf.
Justin, you weren't on when I said that the whole film took place in, well, most of it was in Monroeville
Monroeville
Mall. So, but
Yeah, in the Pittsburgh area, which Romero always always preferred to like shoot in and around Pittsburgh. Like that was his thing. Trying to build the film community there, and I think he largely succeeded, didn't he?
Yeah, he did. Yeah. And I believe that he used the same areas and locations to start off in his Day of the Dead. So I don't know as far as the other two, Survival and Diary, but yeah.
And I'm not sure. I think wasn't Land of the Dead like a soundstage? I think.
Yeah, but like I said, some of it was actually done at the closed down, some of the closed down sections of Northridge Mall. So,
you mean the Dawn of the Dead remake or Land of the Dead?
The Dawn of the Dead remake.
Okay, because I was talking about Land of the Dead.
Land of the Dead, no.
Okay,
but
a lot of the dead to keep straight.
Right.
Indeed.
Like we have a comment. Zardoz is the best trailer ever. Scientific facts. Gonna need a fact check on that later.
That's my fiance's.
I haven't gotten to see Zardoz.
My fiance's father was like, after Day of the Dead, he was like, how many are they going to make in this franchise?
A lot.
I think I'm done.
Well, I mean, he passed away, so sadly, this is it.
Well, there's one more film that they're working on that he hadn't completed, but that they felt like they could complete, but I don't think it was in this franchise.
I believe his son is actually in a project that might be involved. David Romero. I think he might actually be involved on a project that is in the works that might have been still left over from his father's stuff. I don't know as of yet, but I thought that there was something that was being worked on.
We got lost. We got totally lost in this mall. So we were on. We were wrapping up character. Since we were talking about Tom Savini, how about we go right into effects, because woo, this movie had some insane effects. Like, you know, the effects in this look somewhat fake, yet completely convincing every time.
I'm not sure.
Like, it's hard to describe, because it's like, you know, blood looks a little bit too thick. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
but it works. Like, it totally works. Like, it sells it.
I like the head explosions in the beginning with the splat.
I think they did pretty good when it comes to things at the overall. I mean, for the time, anyway.
Some of Savini's best work.
I mean, makeup I felt was a bit inconsistent, but that's just because some zombies were done. Like when Roger became the zombie, they did all this work on the makeup to show you he was a zombie, but there were some people who were walking around, there were zombies who didn't even look like they had makeup on. They were just kind of like regular people just walking around like, I'm a zombie.
Like they didn't even bother to paint him gray, you know?
Was it gray or was it green? I was trying to figure that out.
It was like, it's like a pale blue kind of. It's a really bizarre shade.
Right.
I mean, they definitely are a different zombie than the Lucio Fucci zombie.
I'm wondering what came first. So I know they both came out pretty close to each other. Who was first, Fulci or Romero?
Well, I know that whenever you're talking about zombies, there are either Romero fans and then there are Fucci fans because Fucci, I do believe, actually came out before Romero. So, but Romero is the one that everyone goes to. But as far as paper machete zombies go, that's where Lucio Fulci falls in mind. But I love both zombies, so I kind of sit on both sides and look at them. I love each, So, but what about you, Dustin? You know a little bit. Have you ever seen any Fulci movies?
I've seen almost all of them. Like we talk about we used to talk about them all the time.
Well,
yeah, I've got, just looking at my shelf, I have The Beyond, which is one of my favorites, especially that soundtrack. Cat in the Brain, which you have to be kind of a deeper level of Fulci fan to fully appreciate, but I really enjoyed Cat in the Brain. I thought Cat in the Brain was awesome. Of course, I have Zombie. Actually, one of the online places I like to get stuff from, there's this company called Ibon Press, and they make Lucio Fulci comics. And I have all of their zombie issues that are out to date, including the finale, which is coming out, I think, in a couple months. Looking over at my shelf here. So they actually have the license to do like Fulci's like 7 Gates to Hell. As like an original series, like really expand on it. And so I have their House by the Cemetery comics like incoming. Like I think I'm waiting on the last issue for House by the Cemetery. There's so many Fulci films, I don't always remember the titles off the top of my head. Let's see. So House by the Cemetery. I'm gonna have to get up and go over to the shelf. Sorry.
Let's see. Well, let's see. Lucio Fulci.
City of the Living Dead, Gates of Hell. Duh. Oh my god. No wonder I couldn't remember though, because that movie has like 4 different titles and they're all really generic. And then let's see. Don't Torture a Duckling. Was that Fulci?
Yep.
Okay. So I do have that. I mean, I got a lot of Fulci stuff. I just haven't gotten into it for a while.
And we haven't covered any of Fulci as of yet, so it would.
Yeah, which is surprising.
Yeah, I know. Since we've covered a fair amount of Argento lately, or what? But we can remedy that within the coming year. Alrighty. So, anyone else on what we were talking about? Where were we? We were talking about.
We were talking about effects.
There we go.
So, like the effects in this. I mean, some of them are a little meh. Like there's some zombie like you were saying, there's some zombie makeups, like the airport zombie, like the really iconic zombie that's on the poster. When I look really closely at him, it's like, I can kind of tell that that's fake. But otherwise, everything is just like awesome. Like that machete and the head gag that's on a lot of the posters. Like that's still like, I'm sure exactly how they did it, like step by step, is on this ridiculously immense DVD set. And it still is like, wow, that is so good. So just everything, I can't praise the effects enough, like despite the rough edges.
They were even better than the effects in Death Kappa. Oh, jeez. Anyway.
I know what film you're talking about, too. Moving on to what did you guys think of the effects, Jake? what did you think of the effects?
They were overall, I think they were pretty good. I know I'd read that Savini actually was a little critical of the way the colors turned out, and apparently Romero wanted the brighter colors because they were more comic booky or some such thing. And I will admit, if that's the look you're going for, then it was a very effective way of doing it. Most of the practical effects, I think, were effective without crossing the line of, oh, I can't watch this. So that was good. Yeah, overall, in terms of other effects, like in terms of the way they used editing and that sort of thing, uh, they did a good job. All the helicopter trips and that sort of thing. I know there was like creative editing involved. I think they did a good job with that. Yeah.
What did you think, Brandon?
Again, I think that they did a good job with it overall at the end of the day. Excuse me. Ended up having a cat to chase away.
Okay. Well, as far as the music goes, the music was actually put together by Goblin. So, what did you guys think of the music behind here?
About the music? Well, the music was by Goblin,
Yeah.
which was Argento's like kind of house band.
Mm-hmm.
And Goblin always does like really quality work. So I mean, this has again like some of like the best music for a movie in that era. Like the soundtrack is like so memorable. Like there's a lot of cues that it's like you hear that and it's like, wow, where did I hear that again? It's like, oh, it's from Dawn of the Dead, duh.
Well,
like music pops up in a lot of places.
There are similarities between this music and the music behind Zombie. To me,
I think the music in Dawn of the Dead sounds more upbeat to me. Like in Zombie has Fulci's Zombie has a lot of almost kind of like dirges. I mean, there's a few like I can't even do it halfway right. Oh, New York Ripper is Fulci, duh. It's like, yeah, I have I need to finish off that Fulci collection. So I'm just looking at comments too and getting distracted. Anyway, so Fulci's Zombie, because it has that island setting, it has a few kind of like light, breezy, tropical things. Like think of like a stereotypical like island in the sun theme, and that's what a couple of tracks on the Fulci Zombie soundtrack are like. But the rest of it is all like slow, like menacing, relentless themes. Since you're already on YouTube, open up another tab and type in City Project Zombie, and you'll get this really, really awesome like techno remix of like the Fulci Zombie theme. It's like instead of doom doom doom, it's like doom 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 doom, and it's just like every time I hear it, like I just picture a breakdancing zombie, like the zombie like lurches out and then just starts breakdancing. I don't know, it's this really insane thing my brain does whenever I hear it, and it's always a good time. Whereas Dawn of the Dead has kind of a more it doesn't necessarily have like a singular tone to it. Like the music is both really serious and then there's like silly moments in there too. I mean, we watched the international like Dario Argento cut, which I cannot quite pinpoint all of the changes, like since there's only a 7-minute difference between this and the theatrical version. But from what I understand, he cut out a lot of the humor, and like the funny music was replaced with like more serious music from Goblin. Like in the original version of the score, like at the end when we get like a we get a lot of shots of the zombies like having filled up the mall after Peter and the girl escape. And there's like a really silly like xylophone, which everybody who's seen this will probably remember. And then when Peter is about to shoot himself as the zombies are closing in, and then he decides at the last minute, it's like, you know what, we're gonna fight our way out. And then it switches to like the freaking A-Team music in the theatrical version. In this version that we saw, it switched to a much more serious goblin theme, like not a little bit like the Suspiria theme almost, like with kind of like an urgency to it. So, I mean, this had really great music. I kind of hate to be a bit of like a broken record kind of reviewer. It's like, oh, it was awesome, man. But it's like, you know, I'm trying to think of things that I didn't like about it. And it's kind of tough to do that with Dawn of the Dead.
Well, one thing that we definitely need to make sure to mention, because I was listening, I don't think anyone really mentioned it, is that the music was completely different in the different versions. I haven't seen the American cut, but from what I understand, Romero basically used stock music, whereas Argento had Goblin do the music. And I think Romero went back and kept a couple of those pieces because he liked them a lot, if I understand correctly.
And our audience member says he thinks they blatantly stole whole tracks from Dawn of the Dead in Hell of the Living Dead.
Wouldn't surprise me.
Which, according to him, it's quality trash.
So, and also Argento, I thought I was under the impression he actually helped with the music himself a little bit, which is kind of cool. But also, did anyone really, I guess we can go ahead and talk about this at this point. No one really mentioned Argento's role in the film yet, right?
No.
Basically, you had this thing where Romero was having trouble getting financing, and Argento got wind of the project, and he was a big fan, and he was like, well, I will handle international financing if you will let me handle the editing for that release of the film. So that's how you end up with the two different cuts. And I thought that was kind of cool. I was like, that's a pretty interesting partnership there. Of course, it resulted in quite a few different cuts of the film, but kind of makes me think I need to see the American one day. Yeah,
you should.
I guess. Yeah, one day.
Well, that's the easier cut to get, I believe. I mean, I think most of us. Well, I know I have I think that's the version I actually have. That's one thing that I was kind of late trying to see this because I didn't have the long version.
Yeah, it took a while to find my copy for a decent price. I know I actually found my copy, believe it or not, Dustin, when that what is that, Mega Media? It used to be Take Two over on 76th Street, across the way, away from Cops in a different strip mall, and then it was bought out by someone who worked with Mega Media, and then he sold it to someone from over on the north side, and they've had it ever since. But when I went and bought this film, it was under Take Two, and it was like $14, which wasn't bad for a time when it was still out of print. Even then. So, but yeah, I know a little bit about the history of some of the video places around here since I've lived in Milwaukee longer.
All right.
I haven't lived in Milwaukee, period.
I haven't even been to Milwaukee. One day.
Yeah. Shoot, I haven't been to the state.
All right.
Alrighty. So, did anyone else have anything else to add to this film?
I
Oh,
mean, it's just. I'm
we've got
sorry. Go
favorite
ahead.
scenes.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Who wants to go first? Because I'm just looking at like our outline, and it's like, okay, what's next?
Well,
Do the thing.
I think I've already mentioned mine. My favorite scene is when Roger has a moment with a zombie woman, and because her blood gets on him or something, he just goes nuts, and and he gets in his truck and he mows down a bunch of zombies in a hay fever. So
Well, he gets bitten, and it's like he knows he's dead, and he like freaks out, which understandable.
But I think you're talking about the scene before that, right? With the one where he wasn't paying enough attention, and several of them came in close, and
got him.
yeah. Trying to think of what would be my favorite. Oh wow.
did you even like the film?
Oh man.
No, I liked it. I just nothing really leaps out at me as something that I specifically love. I guess like certain scenes involving certain scenes where Peter and Roger and Steven were kind of just learning to really utilize them all. I guess like some of the what am I trying to say? Supply gathering and that sort of thing. Some of those sequences got pretty fun. There were little moments here and there, but yeah, nothing leaps to mind as a scene that was the great scene.
I actually like the scene when they're playing around in the mall. They just enjoy. It's sort of like that calm before the storm. Before we get the invasion by the bikers and everything, it's just or the guy dying fully. He's going to die, but they're enjoying the moment, and I do like that. That just kind of it shows them not always on the alert.
Like
Well,
they have downtime.
This is kind of a transformation. This is a moment in zombie history where you almost don't get to see the transformation of how someone turns into a zombie as much, and it's a slow transformation here. You know what I mean?
Well, it isn't certainly World War Z where it's like 10 seconds or something like that.
Oh, the millions of zombies crawling up the wall. No. Or Train to Busan, where they're all. Anyways.
Now that was one I actually liked. But
in any case, was there a favorite scene of yours, Dustin?
Well, it's hard to pick kind of just one thing because when I remember this movie, I remember, several different things. I remember that intro. I remember, Tom Savini showing up with his friends. It's like, yeah, we're going to raid the mall. I remember them just kind of goofing around in the mall, like having fun. Not the Savini bikers, although I do remember that before they're horribly killed by zombies. So for me, it's really difficult to pick a favorite. But I think if I have to really name one, I'd go with Ken Foree's escape from the mall, like the bedroom where he's like, the zombies are closing in, she's in the helicopter, and he's just really thinking, it's like, okay, do I just shoot myself and keep them from getting me? And he's like, you know what, fuck this. And he just goes like action hero on the zombies. And it's like, yeah, go Ken Foree, get him. I think I actually did cheer like that the first time I saw that scene. So I think I'll name that as my favorite. Although there is
18
so much
music
great
helps
stuff
with that.
Yeah, I mean the Goblin music worked there too, but just something about like the goofiness of that A-Team music, which it's not technically the A-Team theme, but it sounds a hell of a lot like it. So,
Alrighty.
All right.
And I think that wraps everything up here. So, unless anyone else has anything else to add, okay then. So why don't we start with you, Dustin? Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're from? We'll go to Jake, and then we'll go to Brandon.
Me? Well, I'm the Crypto Horrors here on YouTube. I have a channel I'm a horror collector here in Milwaukee, and I have a channel where I just kind of show off what I find like every week or whenever I get like a good critical mass of content. I also have an Instagram for my collection at also the Crypto Horrors, and I hang out on Twitter a lot, as you guessed it, the Crypto Horrors. So we're looking at launching our own spin-off podcast, which is just talking about horror with different guests, both non-horror industry and pretty much anybody willing to talk to me on Twitter, which it's going to be a pretty good list. So we just need to. So we're also a grad student, so we have to kind of balance our time with that. So that's why uploads are so slow. But if you go subscribe to my channel and my Instagram, I don't really post all that often, so I promise I won't get annoying. Except maybe on Twitter. Like I do tend to, I don't hold back on any of my opinions. And I was in like a 2-hour fight with somebody who was like, Captain Marvel is terrible because Brie Larson, and it's like, geez, why are you guys so obsessed with this? It's like, oh my God, how could you say that? It's like, what? And it was just incredibly stupid. So, yeah, but yeah, that's me. Yeah.
Alrighty, Jake.
All right. Well, I go by Code Bookie Jake. I'm also a big time collector, TV, movies, anime, media of all shapes and sizes. I frequently guest with Brandon on Symptom Sin versus the World, where we talk about physical media, and we enjoyed a very unique film for a feature on that channel this week. So look forward to our review of Death Kappa. But other than that, I do have my own nature themed channel, Kotobuki Jake, on YouTube, but I'm not good at updating. Every once in a while, I spend way too much time putting my work into iNaturalist and don't really work on the videos like I'd like to, but I'm trying to change that. And I do have a hub page as Kotobuki Jake, which is also dedicated to media, but it's rarely updated too, but it's worth reading what's there. And I'll go ahead and put a plug since next week's movie was my selection. We will be doing Scream next week. Looking forward to that. And I'll hand it to you, Brandon.
Well, I'm Septum Sen versus the World. I run a channel where we talk about physical media and the enjoyment of physical media. I have a modest collection myself of a few DVDs here and there.
Just a few.
And we like to share our pickups, what's being released, and some other things. This week we have upcoming reviews. I actually am reviewing Dakota Ray's film, The Dark Days of Demetrius, which is a slightly dark portrayal of humanity.
I have to still get in on that. I know you asked me.
And then, of course, on Friday, as Jake had mentioned, we have our weekly Horrorween, as we call it, segments, where we face off with the evil evil Doctor Streaming, as we are subjected to various movies to review. And of course, as he said, this week's is Death Kappa. But if you haven't caught all of it, you can still catch last week's, which was Night of the Lepus. I occasionally do some work for Inside Movies Galore, and Jake has already said we have Scream coming up, and definitely to look forward to.
Okay, and my name is David Straggy. I am one of the hosts here at Inside Movies Galore, and a founding father of this so-called podcast, and I run it with the rest of you. Jake and Brandon and Dustin, I've come to know very well, and enjoy talking with them about the many different films. And I thank you all for coming along with me on this journey. Never knowing who I was going to talk to next at one point, I'm glad to call you all my friends. So thank you so much for joining us on this great horror-ween adventure where we're going to try to adopt our own Scream habits next week. So get ready and get rowdy, and work on your screams, because we are going to invest and figure out what Scream is all about. So thank you for listening. Have a great day in your morning wherever you are, and keep the lights on wherever you are. Okay.